Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Long week. I can't be the only one who feels like we've jumped through a giant wormhole and time doesn't exist anymore. It's flying by. Lots of weird stuff's going on, clearly. New revelations, new evidence every day regarding a number of different things. But let me mention this real quickly as a quick edit to the last episode. In the previous episode, when I was talking about different kinds of words and, of course, their made-up origin in many cases and how essentially their origin has been weaponized against us, and that was the entire point, was to defend the enemy and then use those made-up definitions against us, there was a particular avenue of thought, just very quickly, that I had in my show notes, but I forgot to mention it, and it had to do with Antifa. Now, Antifa, as you also probably know, and you're well aware, is that stemmed from the Bolshevik Revolution. And it was the basically militant wing within Germany against the German people and against the German government at the time. So at the time, they were called Antifaschistische Aktion, which was founded in May of 1932 by Stalinist leaders of the Communist Party of Germany. It says here the group was established to fight fascists, a term the party used to describe all of the other pro-capitalist political parties in Germany. The primary objective of Antifa was to abolish capitalism according to a detailed history of the group. Now again, this is absolutely hilarious because this right here proves that these individuals using this term don't know what they're talking about. And even with the language that they do use surrounding it, it gives them away. Because again, you can't be fighting fascists, so to speak, which are pro-brotherhood, pro-nationalism, pro-country, pro-capitalism, pro-prosperity, and be a good person, or be a good group. And again, they're communists. So when, like I said basically in the last episode, when somebody lumps all of these groups together in the exact same barrel, it's completely inaccurate. Fascists, by its origin, stand alone. Fascism stands alone. And there were numerous fascist groups that existed throughout Europe that were fighting communists. The same thing existed in Spain. There were fractions of this everywhere. Same thing existed in even Britain. Same thing. But again, they were fighting Antifa. They were fighting individuals who were the militant wing of the Communist Party. So again, in that dynamic of a back and forth, who are you more likely to support, a fascist or a communist? Because it can't be both, because they're not both the same thing. And again, there are endless documentaries regarding Antifa that exist. I would recommend that you find the most objective ones that go the furthest back and tell the actual history of it accurately. But with that said, they also, of course, employ the exact same kind of tactics and violent tactics that they did back then. Burning down buildings, burning automobiles, vandalism, violence, murder, you name it. They do the exact same thing today. And we saw them, of course, come out in full force in 2017 on Inauguration Day, running up and down the streets of Washington, D.C., burning cars, vandalizing buildings, breaking glass, 1,000 other things. Again, this is the childish action, basically, that they take because they have nothing else to do. And then, of course, they cover their faces. They all dress the same typically, and then they stand around. They intimidate people. They organize to make sure that if anybody is attending a particular group of theirs or a rally or something where they're so-called running security and you were to show up late, then they know that you don't belong, and then they simply intimidate you based on their presence. And then they push you away, or they'll get violent with you, or they'll name call and use all those names that they use. But they also, to some extent, try to use the law to their advantage by learning about what they can and cannot do. And at the exact same time, and this is remarkably unfortunate, the flip side of that coin, as I just said, also exists where they vandalize and they do 1,000 other things. Just like what they were doing in Washington, D.C. the other day when Netanyahu was speaking, which, of course, he's a war criminal and he should hang by the neck until dead, and I'll get into him a little bit later. But if anybody believes that these riots or this vandalism is quote-unquote pro-Hamas, well, as it turns out, much of them are Antifa, and much of them, as it turns out, are Jewish. In fact, the one guy who was caught on film burning the American flag in D.C. the other day, after they took down the American flag and put up the Palestinian flag, the guy who burned the American flag was Jewish. So again, this is the dynamic that specifically the Jewish lobby and those who support it and fund it, et cetera, this is what they will do, is they infiltrate these particular groups, but they also just flat out run them. And they'll wear different colors and they'll pretend like there's something else, and then before you know it, they're catering to the Jewish lobby, which is what helps fund them in the first place. So that's our real enemy. Our real enemy is not the Christian Palestinian who loves Christ and doesn't break the law. That's not our enemy. Our enemy is anybody who pretends to be a Palestinian, anybody who funds the militant wing of any organization, whether those individuals are out in front or behind the scenes, and then, of course, the Jewish lobby. That's what's allowing for all of this vandalism. That's what's allowing for the constant division, because this is their game plan. This is exactly what they do. So I just wanted to mention that very quickly off the top. Okay, sort of in that same vein, but I wanted to bring this to everybody's attention because I mentioned this a while back, and it's always in the description below in every single war video at the very bottom of the description. If you get on the publishing outlet armreg.co.uk, you can get 15% off of all of their books, any of their books, and any of their materials by using the promo code American Education FM. Just as a reminder, I get no kickback from this. There's no financial kickback whatsoever. They were just kind enough to offer me that promo code for all of you. And again, you and me, we can get 15% off of any book that they have at their disposal. They were kind enough to send me, however, a copy of their Holocaust Encyclopedia, and I have it now. I ordered it, I believe, the first week of July, and it just showed up the other day. So it can take maybe 2 to 3 weeks for it to show up, but I'm telling you, if you were to purchase this book, which it is kind of pricey, but with 15% off, at the very least, you'll get shipping off, which is kind of nice. This is not a small work by any stretch. It is an actual encyclopedia. It is in alphabetical order. The table of contents is in alphabetical order, and it is well over 627 pages, not including the index. And it looks like a college textbook. It's amazing. It's absolutely incredible. This is undeniable. And the number of scholars and authors that contributed to this are unknown, basically for the sole reason, as they lay out even in the first few pages of the introduction here, they're unnamed specifically because they don't want to be persecuted. Because if you question the Holocaust or the Holocaust, then in many European countries, you'll go to jail. So these individuals are patriots because they're putting the truth out there from a historic standpoint, and you can look up any name or any event or what have you in any alphabetical order you want here, and it's all right here. They have pictures, charts, full backgrounds of endless individuals. It is incredible. It's absolutely incredible. Here's what I'd like to do. On the introductory page, on page 11, they have a number of subsections here. One is titled Why the Holocaust Matters. Another one is Why an Encyclopedia on the Holocaust Matters. Another one is titled Other Holocaust Encyclopedias that apparently exist. And then they talk about the present encyclopedia and this one that exists right here. Here's what I want to do. I just want to read the first few paragraphs from the subsection of Why the Holocaust Matters. And again, this is on page 11 of this giant text. And here's what it says, quote, "The Holocaust is a topic that everyone knows something about. It's a topic that none of us can avoid, like it or not. The reason for this is the fact that it is the single most influential historical topic of the modern world. For sure, Other modern-day genocides happened, and most people can probably name a few. But unless your country or ethnic group has been either a victim or a perpetrator of that genocide, these other foreign genocides basically never play a role in domestic daily politics or social interactions. Most of them will never make it beyond a brief mention on a school syllabus, if at all, and hardly any of them have dedicated museums and memorials. No one cares if we remember, forget, ignore, or even deny these foreign events, or whether we pay tribute to their victims or disrespect them. However, no one in any position of societal or political prominence can afford to ignore, disrespect, or deny the Holocaust, quote unquote. If they did, they would not be prominent much longer. In fact, anyone can lose their job if violating this last taboo of Western societies. Many countries have made, quote unquote, denying the Holocaust a crime, which means you can even end up in prison. Only one genocide in the history of mankind ever reached such prominence that it has a worldwide Memorial Day dedicated to it, January 27th, which the United Nations has declared as the world's Holocaust Remembrance Day. Therefore, the Holocaust matters. This being so, it is important that we understand what it was and what it was not, lest we might be manipulated by people who want to take advantage of our ignorance. This includes extremists on both sides of the spectrum. Those who deny what has solidly demonstrated to be true, and those who want us to believe that which has been proven to be untrue. If a topic has huge importance in society, then it is hugely important to understand it. The purpose of the present encyclopedia is to assist the reader in better understanding what exactly the Holocaust was. It is meant to serve as a reference book for all those who do not wish to search through stacks of books just to find one small piece of the larger puzzle, unquote. It's remarkable. This is an absolutely remarkable text, remarkably overwhelming, and it's undeniable. Absolutely undeniable. If you were to hand this to a history professor or a Holocaust/World War II history professor, they would lose their minds. They would run away in complete cognitive dissonance, and they would have absolutely no choice. There's no way that they would sit down with this and absorb it. So I highly recommend owning this. Again, it's at armreg.co.uk. 15% off with American Education FM promo code. It is a red pill beyond red pills, and it's not one of these books that you buy and then all of a sudden you sell it back at some point at some half-price bookstore. This is a permanent fixture in your forever library. There's no doubt about it. So there you have it. Okay, let me shift gears here now back to the Trump shooting, quote unquote. I've put up a Substack about it with even more evidence that's been presented from anonymous individuals who are digging into this issue more seriously, certainly more seriously than the FBI. Christopher Wray, of course, testified at the House Oversight Committee the other day and essentially lied through his teeth, told a very specific narrative that was scripted for him to clearly tell the American people. This amount of cartridges was found. Apparently they found 8 on the rooftop, which seems highly unlikely, certainly based on the evidence that is available. There's body cam footage also on top of that roof after the fact, after the individual was killed, whoever that individual may be, whether it be Maxwell Yarrick or the Crooks guy, who knows, probably not the Crooks guy. Either way, they openly admit in that body cam footage that someone else was detained. Apparently, at one point, this individual who was detained there and allegedly is still alive was also arrested with Maxwell Yarrick in Pittsburgh, and again was arrested for protesting, apparently, or trying to instill some kind of a riot at a past Trump rally. Either way, this individual's apparent last name is Hopper, and I've included pictures of him too in that Substack article, and again, a lot of these pictures are making the rounds on X and Gab and a number of other places, so it's certainly worth considering and taking into account. Not to mention, there's also audio in that Substack article about testimony, rather, over the radio system and over the communications at the rally that there was a shooter in the water tower, or on top of the water tower. And then, of course, as Christopher Wray was asked these questions during his testimony, there was only one shooter, that no one else was detained to his knowledge. So again, if we're relying on the FBI to tell us the truth, it's never going to happen. They are the enemy of us. Always have been, always will be. This is the way that it is. So, too many moving parts, but again, as far as alternative outlooks on that particular scenario are concerned, I may add a couple of Substacks in the future depending on what else comes out, but as of right now, it's pretty much all getting relatively quiet right about now. And apparently, in the next, whatever it is, couple of weeks, we're supposed to get, more than a couple of weeks, probably another month at least, some kind of a report written by the FBI as to who was involved. Again, I don't expect any of that to actually be the case. There were more vehicles that were apparently removed from the scene. One of them was a van. Another one was a truck. Again, bicycles at the scene when there shouldn't have been, a number of other things. So a lot of moving parts, but the point is that you cannot believe the official narrative of what actually went down. I'm certain that there were shots taken. Of that, I have no doubt. And I'm not saying that I doubt that anyone actually died, and I'm not saying that, that I doubt that Donald Trump would have or could have been grazed. I find the grazing of his ear to be next to impossible. But like I state in the actual article, which was actually stated by another anonymous individual in a lengthy post on Great Awakening, they said that this entire scenario could easily be manipulated, certainly for the public's view, in order to galvanize individuals to side with Trump all at the same time, but also used to wake up endless individuals as to government corruption. Because the more awake people become, the more likely they are to see inaccuracies and hypocrisy and a number of other falsehoods within government action and government communications and government testimony and the things that they write down and then present to the public, and a number of other different angles. So it's almost like you're giving people an extra boost from a psychological warfare standpoint when they're already in the process of starting to wake up and starting to learn more. You give them another scripted opportunity for them to look deeper into particular issues, or at the very least, take it at face value as a benefit to the good guys, so to speak. So, who knows? Either way, I think there's multiple angles on it, and as I say in the Substack too, there's another option, which I mentioned in a previous episode, which is, what if it was a setup from the good guys to, again, basically jump the gun, so to speak, on the bad guys? That they had the bad guy communications that they wanted to do something to Trump, or that people were there in an attempt to do something to Trump, and so the good guys pulled the trigger quicker by, again, either planting some kind of a capsule in Trump's ear that would pop, and then he would grab his ear and then duck down, and then other people would take shots at who the bad guys really were. Yes, there may be collateral damage in the process, so to speak, and other people may lose their lives, but at the exact same time, you're exposing the enemy's last option, or one of their last options, which is to actually take a shot at Donald Trump in broad daylight at a rally. So now that has been expelled, basically. It's been completely used. That entire scenario has been played out now, so what are the odds that it would happen twice? I mean, let's take this into consideration. If they really wanted Trump dead, he would be. Okay, now I know that they've tried to kill him before. I'm fully aware of that. But if they really wanted to shoot him dead right then and there, they could have. They could have had multiple guns set up. They could have had multiple guns set up at snipers. They could have had multiple people shooting at the agents and the U.S. Marshals that were on top of him on that stage. And they could have just kept shooting if they really wanted to kill him right then and there. But then again, maybe the bad guys were outgunned. Maybe they were outnumbered. So there you go. Again, lots of scenarios, lots of moving parts. Just wanted to bring that up one more time. And again, that Substack article is over in the americanclassroom.substack.com, titled The Trump Shooting, quote unquote, the moving pieces and current elements that don't add up. So there you go. Now let me get back to the Netanyahu speech very quickly, because again, I watched almost all of it and listened to almost all of it. It was as awful and horrific and tasteless as you might imagine. Again, this right here is continuing to show the divide. So when individuals who are, of course, American politicians are openly stating, well, we're all unified and we couldn't be more unified, that actually couldn't be further from the truth. There is a separate dimension of individual that does exist. And it's the individuals who, again, research the truth and understand what's really going on. And even, I should say this too, that even a blind squirrel finds an acorn once in a while. Now, I don't like this person because, of course, they're a complete abomination and totally irrational, but even a blind squirrel finds an acorn once in a while, and that has to do with Rashida Tlaib. Rashida Tlaib the other day, a representative from the state of Michigan, she, of course, was sitting in the speech, and she didn't have to be, but she was there. And Thomas Massie was not there, and openly said that he wouldn't be because he's not going to be there to listen to a war speech and listen to people beat the war drums, which they all do, because they're all paid by the Jewish lobby, and a lot of them are Jewish themselves. But Rashida Tlaib was there with a sign that said war criminal on one side and then flipped it around and it had another message on the other. And she's not wrong. I mean, again, kudos to her. Well done. It would have been better for her to not be there, I think. But either way, if you're going to be there and you're going to hold up a sign that says war criminal, good for you. Because again, it's false equivalency. You can't have a bunch of people in a room standing up and applauding everything that Netanyahu says, and then on the other hand, somebody hold up a sign that says war criminal. Someone has to be right and someone has to be wrong. As it turns out, she's right. He is a war criminal. In fact, the constant lying that he was referencing over and over again regarding all these false stories about Hamas killing all these Jewish babies and blah, blah, blah. I mean, he even brought up all that stuff all over again. And there's an aspect of this too which really does have to be brought up, is that not only are the war drums being beaten very hard right now regarding going to war against Iran, and you're watching the vast majority of our entire government agree with such a move. Donald Trump does not agree with that at all. In fact, I've put these videos in war videos recently, and I've put these videos on my Gab page. There's ample evidence that clearly shows Donald Trump disagreeing with Netanyahu on practically everything. Even moments where he's standing next to Netanyahu and praising Palestinian people and saying that they've had a very difficult time since the beginning and they've been persecuted for a long time and that it has to stop. And Netanyahu is looking around like, who is this person? Why is he saying this? He's not supposed to say that. We're supposed to control this guy. What the hell's going on? And at the exact same time, you're starting to see this normalization of this perverse word usage and gaslighting in order to get people to actually believe that Iran was somehow responsible for taking a shot at Donald Trump, quote unquote. I mean, again, Elise Stefanik's pushing that lie. Netanyahu is pushing that lie. Lots of people are pushing that lie. There's no proof of that. None. You don't actually think Iran wants to go to war with us, do you? You don't actually believe that the vast majority of Americans want to go to war with Iran. I mean, we could destroy them in the blink of an eye, but what's the point? What does that accomplish? It accomplishes nothing. It would just be Iraq 2.0, and the only thing that it would do, of course, is allow all of the money lenders and all of the money controllers and the influencers to get in that area, geographically speaking, and take over. It would perpetuate the Jewish lobby even more than it already has been. But shutting down Israel and shutting down Ukraine and getting these criminals out of these places is something that has to immediately happen. Immediately. And people like Netanyahu don't want that to be the case. Again, he was lying so frequently in that speech, too, that I was expecting him to start saying something like, we found this giant factory filled with soap, and the soap was made from the skin of kidnapped Jews. And we ended up finding a lampshade factory that was made of all of this Jewish skin that was made into lampshades. That old lie regarding, the so-called Holocaust. I mean, it's that kind of stuff that these individuals perpetuate. And then they just expect everybody to just blindly believe them and clap like seals. Well, that unfortunately was what was happening in Congress the other day when he was speaking. However, where you can visibly see the division is not everybody was standing up. Not everybody was applauding, and there were some empty seats in the crowd too. That's a good thing. But keep in mind, the people standing up, the people blindly applauding, these people are your enemy. They're my enemy. And our enemy is right here, in our own country, all of the time. Not to mention, again, those protests that were taking place outside and the open vandalism that was taking place of those statues, monuments, the Liberty Bell, whatever else was being vandalized at the exact same time. I mean, it was awful. And again, people were allowing that to happen. Yes, there was a police presence, but not a big one. And then those individuals were also being bussed in. Well, who paid for the buses? I mean, this is a general investigation with clues and evidence that anybody would need to look into. Who paid for the buses? Where did these people come from? Is it Antifa just dressed up in Palestinian garb? Probably. Is it individuals who really support Palestine? Maybe. Are they Jewish? Probably. See, they shapeshift. I mean, they're known shapeshifters. That's exactly what's been going on here, and it isn't going to stop. These individuals are going to get bussed in time and time again to, again, basically be a complete sideshow for any speech that's being given, or any presentation that's taking place, or any bill that gets written, or any Supreme Court decision that gets made, or an election takes place, and a result goes one way or another. It really won't matter who wins, quote unquote, the election in November. There's going to be some kind of rioting. There's going to be a sort of a repeat of the 2017 Inauguration Day riots that took place in Washington, D.C. Something like that will happen again. The question will become, what is the response going to be? Because in reality, rounding up these people and arresting them and interrogating them and investigating them should not be a difficult thing. The National Guard should immediately come out and immediately start slapping cuffs on these people and not push them backwards, but just go get them and then detain them and then again question them and conduct an actual investigation and then follow the money and so on and so on. And we know where the money always ends up and always leads back to. But that's not happening yet. And we have to see that happen. This is in that giant bucket of things that I think that we just have to see. So that's my 2 cents on that. I was also thrown this, by the way. This dates back to the CrowdStrike stuff from the other day. AJ Gochik texted me, and we were going back and forth about the Trump incident and that entire rally. And he said that a friend of his in Florida seems to believe that the CrowdStrike thing also has to do with massive money laundering, some of which has to do with potentially Jill Biden, Joe's wife, receiving somewhere around $1 billion in a negotiation in order to have Joe step aside. That the reason that Joe, and it actually sort of reaches back to something I said earlier, which was that Jill was kind of controlling Joe and sitting on all of that for influence and money, because they know that lots of people want Joe out of the way. And now, of course, you can see how the media is framing Joe leaving and openly saying that he's not running for president anymore, and they're basically painting him as being a patriotic hero for stepping aside and leaving it to a younger generation to move forward with our democracy, quote unquote. But Jill was basically sitting on the entire scenario, or as the story goes, basically for a blackmail cash cow opportunity. your sort of I don't know, borderline definition of extortion. We'll leave, but we're going to leave when you give us the amount of money that we want. And CrowdStrike helped facilitate that, allegedly. I wouldn't put it past them. There has to be money exchanging hands right now, the likes of which we can't possibly comprehend. So there's just another scenario for you right there. Again, wouldn't doubt it in the slightest. Okay, shifting gears here now, education stuff. This was thrown my way by our Virginia educator from Inside Higher Ed, and this one's funny. It was on July 24th, and it was titled, Innovative Teacher Prep Programs Aim to Fix K-12 Shortages. Of course, I've brought this subject up numerous times on the show, all the backdoor deals and all of these sort of upside-down ways in which they attempt to increase the likelihood of individuals becoming teachers because the shortage is so massive. They are trying to put chewing gum in the Titanic right now to fill the hole, and it just isn't going to work. The subtitle was, Enrollment in Teacher Preparation Programs is still about 45% lower than in 2010, but there are signs it's rebounding. Some experts credit a spate of efforts to make getting a teaching degree more affordable, it says. Now, as you might expect, making things quote-unquote affordable or easier than they already have been certainly in the past, and even if becoming a teacher back in the day was even more difficult than it is now, what kind of person and kinds of people do you think are actually going to be inhabiting the business? And what makes anybody believe that some document like Project 2025 is actually going to have any impact on the business as a whole? There's no way that it will. This is a constant can kicking down the road that is going to continue for a very long time, and nothing is going to improve. As I've brought up on the show before, and it's not a bad thing, by the way. I mean, again, this isn't a black pill. This is a good thing. This is a good thing that the business is failing. This is a good thing that the enemy is scrambling in an effort to try to make ends meet. The interesting part, too, is that they always end up as a default setting trying to come back to the American people in order to tax us by forcing individuals to support a levy and then vote for a levy, which of course raises everyone's taxes. Well, this is the worst time to do that. And more Americans are waking up to taxes. And how often does an American want to continue to pay into a system that they don't use, aren't a part of, and is a failing system? Only a failing business would continue to go back to people who want nothing to do with the business and beg for money and then actually vote for it themselves, like some normal slave typically would. It's completely ridiculous. But here's what the article says. It says, quote, a fast-growing collection of teacher preparation programs designed to recruit and retain more educators, including apprenticeships, residencies, and other scholarships, are sprouting up to help fill the nation's teacher vacancy hole, which has more than tripled in size since 2010. That void exists in part because of the new teacher pipeline dried up in the wake of the Great Recession, which spurred national conversations about ballooning student debt and worries that the cost of earning a degree in some fields, including teaching, isn't worth the relatively low-paying career prospects. Between 2010 and 2021, enrollment in traditional teacher preparation programs dropped 45%, according to a report the American Association of Colleges for Teacher Education, or AACTE, published earlier this year. But the long decline that followed the 2008 recession may be on the rebound. Enrollment in and completion of teacher preparation programs increased by 3% between 2019 through 2020 and 2020 through 2021 school years, which is the latest data available. Now, do you believe that? Do you actually believe that? With everything that's been brought up here on this show and all of the evidence that I've brought to bear, do you actually believe what Inside Higher Ed says and what this teacher education journal and or conference openly state? that teacher education programs have increased their enrollment by 3% in the last 4 to 5 years. Absolutely not. it's so laughable. I can't believe anybody believes that. It's beyond ridiculous. Again, just look up these teacher education programs. They've cut their professors. They've gotten rid of adjunct professors, rather. And some colleges and universities have done away with their teacher education programs altogether. But everybody's supposed to believe that these programs have increased by 3% nationwide? No way. There's no way that's the case. It says, quote, "We don't yet know if that's statistical noise or if this is maybe the beginning of a turnaround," said J.C. King, research, policy, and advocacy consultant for the AACTE. She just said it. It's political noise. Or statistical noise, rather. they openly admit it. They say, it increased by 3%, but we don't know if it did or not. Okay, good work. Very objective. It said, quote, "What we do know is that there's been a huge amount of work going on to make education preparation programs or educator preparation programs more accessible to a broader array of students, i.e., illegals. This is happening too. They're going to normalize hiring illegal adults who can speak a little bit of English, just enough to get by, so that they can hire somebody who has a pulse to be a school teacher." It says, under a directive from President Biden, the Labor Department has ramped up its investment in stemming the teacher shortage over the past 2 years, giving more than $100 million in apprenticeship grants to state and local initiatives that partner with higher learning institutions and other nonprofits to mitigate the financial burden of becoming a teacher. Well, there's a burden, all right. I don't know how financial it is, but there's certainly a burden. It says between 2018 and 2023, the number of federally registered teacher apprenticeship programs increased by 247%. to 7,450, according to the DOL, Department of Labor. They support an earn while you learn, quote-unquote, model that allows aspiring teachers, including paraprofessionals already employed by a school district, to get paid to work in classrooms under the supervision of a mentor while simultaneously earning a teaching degree or credential at low or no cost. It says, quote, "The idea is to both lower the financial barrier and expand the amount of clinical preparation." Okay. That's not really it. They're doing this because they know that the well is dry, as they said at the beginning, and as you've heard me say on the show before, in teacher education programs. They're drying up. They're drying up because the morally sound don't want to be school teachers anymore. 2020 was the litmus test. And many people failed that litmus test. And they doubled down and they were like, these kids need us. This building needs us. I'll show everybody my level of dedication. I'll wear the mask and take the shots and make children walk around with plastic dividers like zombies and have them sit in a square outside on the playground while they stare at the ground wearing a mask, being demoralized, but I'm a good person because I'm a team player. They're child abusers, which means that's what you're left with in the business. People who tolerated child abuse, and then the people who left who didn't want to tolerate child abuse. It says adding such initiatives is also an aim to diversify the overwhelmingly white teacher workforce, which serves the country's increasingly racially diverse student population. Ah, yes. Get rid of white people, and they openly state it. Which means if they're not going to hire whites, which they don't want to, and they're on record as saying so, who are they going to hire? Illegals. Because in rural and suburban communities where you can't find quote-unquote minority or dark-skinned individuals, who are you left with to hire? You either reluctantly hire and grit your teeth while you're hiring a white person, or you hire an illegal. This is the rationale that exists within this business, and it is completely irrational. But this is their wavelength of thought. We want to hire more people of color. You couldn't be more racist. You couldn't be more bigoted. It says, quote, "It's not the traditional one semester or less of student teaching that is almost always unpaid and presents a huge financial challenge for a lot of students. Because if you're student teaching all day and going to school, it's very hard to have a paid job." I'm going to skip down here a little bit in the article where it says financing teacher prep. This is a long article. It's good because, again, it exposes these lies. And they're being remarkably hypocritical in their own article here regarding a great deal of these issues. But it says, quote, "Such outcomes are the goal of the Arizona Teacher Residency, which launched at Northern Arizona University in 2022 to help ease what the state's education department called, quote, a dire shortage of teachers. The average teacher in the Grand Canyon state earned about 33% less than other college-educated workers, and they teach in classrooms that receive the second lowest per pupil spending allocation in the country. As a result of decades-long disinvestment in public education, nearly 30% of teacher vacancies were unfilled more than a month into the 23-24 school year, according to a report from the Arizona Personal Administrations Association, or Administrators Association." See, they say that, but then on the other hand, they say teacher education programs are increasing by 3%. I'm sorry. That's a false equivalency, and you can't have both things happening at the exact same time. You can't have 30% of teacher vacancies existing within a state while you're also trying to increase all of these backdoor ways of becoming a school teacher, a certified licensed school teacher, and then say, oh, don't worry, teacher education programs are increasing. No, they're not. Not in the stereotypical traditional way at the university level anyway. It says many of those positions have been vacated by frustrated early career teachers. Yep, the turnover rate, which is where the Arizona Teachers Residency, mentoring and early career support comes in. Quote, "We're preventing that hemorrhaging when teachers are the most vulnerable to burning out." Victoria Thiessen Homer, founding director of the program, said, quote, "Once we get them past the first few years, they're much more likely to stay." No, that's not true. They try to get them past the first couple of years just to get them inoculated to it. And they try to get them to, again, get used to it to the point where whatever is going on in the environment is what will always go on. So get used to it or don't. But once you're once you're through the first couple of years, then you'll get a taste as to how the business is basically going to end up and how you're going to end up in the business, which is not going to be a happy place. It says the program was started with a one-time $5 million federal grant from the pandemic-era Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, ESSER. It's still relatively small, with about 20 teachers in training in each of the first 3 cohorts who have all agreed to teach in a Title I school for a minimum 3 years after completing their schoolwork. Yes, that's right. They're using ESSER money in order to fund these backdoor teacher education programs for retention purposes. I thought it was for COVID. I thought that money was supposed to exist for some illness. They're actually using the government money now in an attempt to keep people around. It's amazing. And it still isn't working. I find it glorious. Here's another one that she sent me. This is from the VirginiaMercury.com, and it was titled, "Daughter of Former Supreme Court Justice Appointed to Virginia Board of Education." This is Antonin Scalia's daughter. It says, Meg Bryce, a daughter of the late conservative Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia, has been promoted, appointed rather, by Governor Glenn Youngkin to serve as the newest member of the Virginia Board of Education. The governor has yet to fill the second seat on the 9-member board after 2 seats became available earlier this month. Quote, "We are excited to have Dr. Bryce as a part of the team now," said board president Grace Creasy, who Governor Glenn Youngkin appointed. Quote, "Thank you so much. We look forward to all that you have to offer and bring it as far as your expertise to add to our team here." Bryce, a mother and college psychology teacher, has been criticized for taking her children out of Virginia's public schools following the pandemic. Bryce told the Daily Progress that she took them out of Murray Elementary School in Albemarle County, if I'm saying that right, after losing faith in the school's leadership during the pandemic. Last year, Bryce unsuccessfully ran for the at-large seat on the Albemarle County School Board, saying she wanted to help improve the system. She's also written commentary in opposition of decisions made by Albemarle County schools regarding lowering the standards, quote unquote, and ignoring parents. In the same year, she told CBS 19 that being Scalia's daughter made it, quote, "very easy for people to dismiss me as partisan because of my maiden name." The late justice opposed abortion, affirmative action, and gay rights. In the same interview for her school board run, she said she hoped people would look at her policies and issues instead. She joined the board for the first time during Wednesday's work session, and after she was introduced, Bryce did not directly comment on her appointment. She's expected to speak during Thursday's business meeting. Let's see. Extensive background in education, advocacy for student-centered policies, and her commitment to restoring common sense in education for all Virginia students will be instrumental in ensuring that every parent, student, and teacher receives the essential resources and support needed to thrive. Okay. Again, it's a bit like rearranging deck furniture on the Titanic. You know, a good position here and there can be a good thing, but at the exact same time, as we all know, the most awake are leaving. Which means, what are these kinds of individuals going to be left to maintain? They're going to have to do whatever they have to do from a business standpoint to keep the business going. And the only way that they can do that is by continuing to flood schools with illegal aliens, because more and more parents are pulling their children out of these environments. And as you just heard in the last article, more and more individuals don't want to be school teachers because it's an immoral business. So again, she's going to have to manage this into something else. Just like all of these state boards of education are going to have to manage all of this into being something else that it is not currently, which ultimately is, again, going to have to be some kind of a home for the mentally handicapped and the physically handicapped, because the most sane and the most awake students are no longer going, which is good. So there's going to have to be a complete revamping of this. But again, as I've said before, with everybody screaming about Project 2025, they've never read the document. The document doesn't call for the elimination of American education as we know it. It calls for constant money being thrown at it again and again and again, and it calls for constant reform. Again, the major reforms that have to take place in the field of K-12 education as we know it almost can't be done, because you're talking about brain surgery on just about everybody who runs the entire business. And certainly the individuals within, not to mention all of the nefarious associations that are tied to K-12 education, both public, private, and charter. Superintendents associations, school board associations. I mean, they all have to go. But that's not going to happen, is it? Which means, what are you really reforming? What are you really doing? Project 2025 only seeks to change a few things so that other people can profit. And it's all just window dressing. Ultimately, the exact same thing is going to exist that has existed for a very long time, and look where that's gotten us. They're not talking about changing state standards in curriculum. That'll never happen. It's law. And those standards are now the foundation of the curriculum that gets presented to American students, so to speak, who of course are indoctrinated within classroom settings, which means is the curriculum actually going to change? Of course not. Are things going to become far more objective and simple within American K-12 classrooms where all the teacher has to do is show up, teach their subject, and then go home? Of course not. That's not going to happen either. The fight has only just started. And when they eliminate the Department of Education, which they're going to do and should happen relatively quickly, when that happens, like I've said before, the local fight is going to get crazy. This is where the cockroaches are going to come out when the lights get turned on. And everybody's going to start circling the wagons. The whole alphabet soup gang is going to come out together with one another. There's going to be rainbow flags, the likes of which you haven't even seen yet. It's going to get nuts. It's going to get absolutely crazy. And again, these individuals are going to double down on their perversions. They're going to double down on their insanity. The schools are going to become less safe than they already are, and they're already in an all-time low when it comes to safety. Certainly the last child abuses that have occurred over the last 4+ years, with all the mask-wearing, shot-taking, genocide that's taken place. But again, you take all of that and you throw it together. I mean, you can't possibly reform that. You have to abolish it. And as I've said a million times, the easiest way to walk away is to just walk away. You vote with your feet. And you leave these people who are attempting to prop up this corrupt system without a chair when the music stops. And you're in control of the music. So pull the plug on the jukebox, make sure that they don't have a chair when the music stops, and then the whole game ends. That's the best way to finish this off. So that's my 2 cents, but again, it might be a good position. Who knows? She could be a hard left-wing whack job. Just because her dad was Antonin Scalia doesn't necessarily mean anything. I mean, all of Ronald Reagan's kids were whack jobs by and large. So, the family you come from doesn't really matter necessarily, but there isn't going to be much left to reform. They're going to have to try to manage a criminal business for the future when some of the funding goes away and some of the federal influence goes away. But it's just going to get real messy. I can't imagine being in a position like that here in the next 5 years. It's going to be nuts. One more thing here, just a quick little bone to pick before I read this study very quickly. Chris Rufo was running his mouth over on X again. I'm not a fan of his, and you all know why. He's a do-gooder, and he thinks that he's God's gift to education, even though he's never taught a day in his life. And he's, of course, controlled opposition, and he picks low-hanging fruit all the time. Back on July 16th, he tweeted out this, quote, "I'm preparing an investigative series on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the federal government. If you're working in a federal agency, leak me documents, recordings, and other materials at chrisrufo@protonmail.com. We'll protect your anonymity. We're going to abolish DEI. Help us get there." Is this new? Does he actually believe that we don't know that diversity, equity, and inclusion and that Jewish lobby scheme, which was created by the Jewish lobby, doesn't exist? We know it exists. So what are you actually going to be exposing? More presentations, more professional development that's already out there that we're already aware of? This is the controlled opposition, low-hanging fruit stuff that he engages in time and time again. It's remarkably weak. And he wants everybody to do the homework for him so that he can present it to people like he's the one who found all of it. It's ridiculous. He's just so weak and pathetic. God, just gross. Anyway, okay. There's this now. I wanted to read this. I've known about this for quite some time, but I wanted to bring it to everybody's attention if you were unaware. It's rather interesting, not surprising. But we all know, of course, that the education system roots out creativity and stomps it out and stomps on the IQs of endless children and endless individuals. And as it turns out, it does so with the majority of individuals who actually go. That they never reach their potential, even at their age, as they are attending these schools. So American K-12 schools can put the term or phrase or saying critical thinking, quote unquote, in all of their presentations and all of their school board slideshows all they want. We know that that's not what happens in American K-12 schools. Public, private, or charter. We know it's not happening. And we know that if you're a school teacher who actually engages in critical thinking activities by bringing up real history, real science, not fake literature, etc., that you're going to lose your job. You'll be reprimanded and you'll lose your job for critical thinking. And if a student actually critically thinks, heaven forbid, with a presentation or what have you, or a comment that they make in a classroom, if whatever they say or present is said or presented to a teacher who doesn't want to hear it, that teacher is going to run to administration in the blink of an eye and complain against said student, thereby crushing critical thinking and peer learning. Because they don't want anybody to believe that a student might know more than the so-called educator, and or that a student might know more than their peers about a particular subject. So you can't have the student speaking out of turn about something that they know to be factually accurate that other people are completely unaware of. Well, as it turns out, this is all intentional, and you know this to be right. This is from an article in a website titled medium.com. It was titled Think Like a Child. This specifically brings up a creative thinking study among youth that was created by a George Land. So here's what this says, quote, in 1968, Professor George Land conducted a research study on creativity using a creative test that he devised for NASA. You'll have to excuse that part of it, but either way, moving on, to select innovative scientists and engineers. It was a simple test that measured the ability to look at a problem and generate new and innovative ideas. A sample American population of 1,600 4 to 5-year-olds were part of the research, and the results showed that 98% scored at the genius level of imagination. That finding led to a longitudinal study to retest the group again at 10 and 15 years old. What he found was at age 10, those who scored at the genius level dropped to 30% and 12% at the 15 years old level. The same test was given to over 1 million adults, averaged 31 years old, and only 2% scored at the genius level. In a separate longitudinal creative test, the Torrance Tests of Creativity Thinking by Ellis Paul Torrance, the results showed that the highest creativity drop in elementary school children occurs at around 9 years old or 4th grade. The phenomenon is referred to as the, quote, 4th grade slump in creativity. Jeanne S. Shull, a Harvard Graduate School of Education psychologist, writer, and researcher, first coined the 4th grade slump, quote unquote, when she identified 2 stages of reading development, learning to read and reading to learn, in which the second stage takes place at 4th grade and beyond, causes a dip in reading. It is during the second stage where study has shown 40% of kids between 5 to 8 years old read every day, but drops to 29% by 4th grade in a 2006 Scholastic Inc. survey. A similar point on loss of creativity, was made by Sir Ken Robinson in his famous TED Talk about schools killing creativity. In his talk, he highlights our education system prioritizes subjects to support the labor workforce and uses academic performance as a measure of intelligence. This ongoing tendency to measure and bound children to those 2 performance factors undermines brilliance that do not fit the system. I believe this narrow point of view is what conditions us to follow the roads set by others and forget that we have the capability to diverge and use our creativity and imagination like our 5-year-old self to dream up new paths. It wraps up here and it says, divergent thinking is the essence of creativity and foundational to the ideation process of design thinking. It is the process of allowing the mind to freely imagine new possibilities without judgment of what's possible or not. Once you have a set of new and innovative ideas available, then you'd converge back and move forward, with the best sets of options. For example, if we can agree that there are jobs in the future that no one knows about today, then we must begin to diverge on what we can do with our passion outside of the society's norms. Once we are faced with possibilities, we can then converge to form tangible paths that will lead us to our unique purpose. Stop looking outward for answers and begin to cultivate your divergent thinking skills and let your creativity propel you forward, unquote. As we know, and I'm preaching to the choir here, you cannot accomplish that in an American K-12 public, private, or charter school. It's impossible by design. Only the free-thinking mind can exist either by itself or with limited to no distraction in a home environment where an individual has the ability to be quiet, think, ask questions, and then search answers appropriately online or in books. And as we know, the internet is the largest book that exists, where the truth does exist. But that does not exist in a brick-and-mortar K-12 public, private, or charter school. You're not going to find it there. I've seen Ken Robinson's presentations over the years. I even started watching him back when I was a school teacher, and he was 100% right back then, and he's right now. So again, George Land with a creativity test that showed, again, that individuals are less likely to read the older they get, and they're less likely to read for wanting to learn instead of just reading to accomplish a particular paper or a test that has to be conducted at the end of reading such a book. It's pathetic. Again, that right there is the system teaching people that learning doesn't matter. Just do enough to get by. That's what the system teaches people. But again, at that age, people will never reach their full potential unless they leave. It's the only way it'll happen. Okay. Couple of jab-related things. Actually, just two very briefly, and I'm going to end with some audio here and then wrap this up. Kind of a shorter episode here, and it's the 4th episode of the week, so there you go. Steve Kirsch, as you might be aware, I've mentioned him on the show, played audio of him before. He thinks viruses are real. Joke's on him. He doesn't seem to understand that one lie leads to another, and that when you believe a lie, that lie is going to take you to another lie, and then another lie, and another lie. And during and throughout those lies involves action. In this particular case, believing that viruses are real and believing that COVID is real and that there was actually a pandemic when in fact there was not, would lead you, of course, to wearing a mask, and then it would lead you to taking shots. Well, now Steve Kirsch, of course, being at least double jabbed, and admittedly so, not only physically looks older than he did before the jabs, but he's now blind in one of his eyes. He wrote a Substack about it, of course, playing the victim. Woe is me. I was typing up this data regarding the Czech Republic and blah, 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 and then all of a sudden I went blind in one of my eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, it's jab-induced. It's the only explanation. You don't just go blind in one of your eyes while you're typing up something unless you're jabbed. So, good luck to him, but, we reap what we sow. And he can be as pig-headed and as stubborn as he wants to be, and he can dig his feet into the ground as tough as he wants, but he would do well to start coming around on the real facts here and understanding that he fell for this. And it's the foundational lies, again, that he believes that led him to that point. So, there's that. I'll end with this. This is some beneficial audio here, and quite a history lesson and a personal story from an individual testifying on Dr. Mackes's Substack page more specifically for the Children's Health Defense and the jab testimonies that have been taking place here. This is a Suzia Ofterhide, and she has had 6 children and raised all 6 children, all of which did not receive any vaccination whatsoever. Very positive story here, and a lesson, I think, for everybody, to the benefits of course, what happens with individuals when they are not jabbed, in particular children from birth, and even prenatal, regarding the mother, of course, receiving no shots as well. This is all a benefit. We have to eliminate all vaccinations from our vernacular. We have to eliminate all vaccination from society. It has to be done away with permanently. This is 11 minutes long. I'm going to leave you with this. Have a great weekend, everybody. Check out the Substack if you're interested. Remember to check out armreg.co.uk for 15% off with American Education FM and the promo code over there if you're interested as well, for either their Holocaust Encyclopedia or any of the other excellent books that they have at their disposal. Give this a listen, and I will catch you on Monday. Peace.
How many children do you have?
I have 6 children.
6 children. And were they vaccinated?
No, I did not vaccinate any of my children. When I was about 8 years old, the polio vaccine was big in the United States, and my mother was not vaccinating us because she had a doctor who was serious about intact immune systems and didn't feel like vaccinations helped. So my mother told me that the polio vaccine was ground up pregnant monkey kidneys, and as a sensitive child, that just so hurt my heart. And that might be the beginning of why I didn't vaccinate my own children. But while I was an unvaccinated child in the 50s, I found that the nurses would chase me down and make me feel really guilty and bad because I wasn't vaccinated.
What kind of things would they say to you?
Polly, it's been a while. I don't know. I felt shamed. Actually, is how I felt.
That's awful. I'm sorry.
And it felt terrible because I was so upset about the pregnant monkeys that had to die so that I could be healthy. I've never felt that anything like that really works very well, where you have to kill one creature to save another.
Right. So you had your 6 children. Now, did you have them at home?
Yes, they were all naturally born. In fact, I said to the fathers, I said, "You got them in, you get them out." And honestly, both fathers who I ended up divorcing were excellent mid people in the situation. They were very good.
So you didn't get, in this day and age, the vitamin K and all of that kind of stuff. You didn't get hounded. You didn't have people knocking on your door.
No, it's funny. I went to one inspection when I was pregnant with my first son, and I was a vegetarian, and this doctor was also a vegetarian. So that was the only prenatal inspection I ever had, was before my first child, and then I went ahead and had another 5 after him without anyone touching me or scaring me with all the things. Like, my daughter's had children now, and the way they scare her is terrible to me.
So we're led to believe that unvaccinated children are, extremely unhealthy, they carry disease, and they're going to die. Tell us about your 6 children that have never had a vaccine.
Well, Polly, we never ever went to the hospital. We never went to the doctor. We never paid any medical bills. I mean, I think I'm unique, even as a spiritual person who does that. I didn't feel it was necessary. If we're spiritual beings, if we're made in God's image and likeness, we're super special. And we need to remember that, and in the way olden days, the mothers were the original doctors. And I believe we need to remember that.
We do. And so do you have grandchildren?
I do. I have 11.
And are they vaccinated?
2 are. 9 are not, as far as I know.
And can you see the difference we're not going to say any names or anything, but can you see the difference between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated?
At this point, no. Everybody seems rather healthy.
It's good to hear.
Yeah, I'm grateful.
So,
but I pray a lot about that stuff too. I mean, I really think that we can heal through prayer because I've seen so much of it in my life.
I agree with you. Now, just to ask you this question about the COVID era, did you take the COVID shot?
I sure didn't. I even boycotted my church because they were masking and because they say that God is all and God is good. They should have said, no, we cannot do this. This is against our religion. And we did not do that. And I was pretty upset. No, I acted mostly normal. I'm a little bit retired now, so I get to, call the shots in my life. And we did howl at 8:00 at night, and I loved that part. That was fun.
So, so your church, don't get me started on the churches during COVID.
No.
So tell us more about what you want to talk about today, because it's amazing. You've got these wonderful unvaccinated children, unvaccinated grandchildren. So your life is going to be wonderful.
My life already is wonderful, for sure. I wanted to talk a little bit about what we call childhood diseases. When I was a child, we would celebrate those diseases. For one thing, they were invisible when they were most contagious. And then when I was a mother, we used to have parties. So we could pass those measles or chickenpox to each other so that people would get the immunity that comes with that and not be concerned about those when they became adults. That was how it was when we were children, or when I was the grown-up and my kids were children. And now my daughter is so faced with, she lives in Georgia in the home of the CDC, and she is so faced with concerns about those simple childhood diseases, because it seems like mainstream medicine has made them into something terrible when they're really quite benign. So I would like to see mothers reclaim their position as home physicians. We need to come back to a lot of our home remedies, honestly.
What advice do you have to the young mom who is fearful of everything because she's watching mainstream news or talking to the wrong people?
Listen to your intuition. Too often people have been led down a path and there's something inside of them that says no. And we need to get better at listening to that, because that voice is super important to us all, to our happiness, our well-being, and the well-being of our children, I do believe.
And what about the people who are injured? They took the shot and they're injured, and they're looking at you now and just wishing they'd been that kind of person that had done their research. What do you say to them?
Well, 3 of my sons did go ahead and get the jab. And whenever it crosses my mind, I pray for them. And I'm convinced that we can heal from the jabs as well as anything else with good spiritual support.
So 3 of your children had the COVID shot and they'd never had a vaccine before that?
Some of them might have had some when they were in college or whatever. But no, 1 never had anything before that. Maybe 2 never did, but the 3rd one might have. It's not the sort of thing they want to talk to me about very much, as you know.
What about, okay, here's some advice you can give. There's a lot of people, excuse me, there's a lot of people who have children that have grown up and they went and got the COVID shot, or they're vaccinating their grandchildren or whatever it is, and it hurts them deeply.
Right.
Because they know the real dangers. What advice do you have to those people that are constantly in anxiety because of what's going on in their family?
I would suggest that they begin by looking beyond allopathy for solutions. I think there are solutions that people are finding that are, more other healing modalities, herbs and things like that. And I totally believe that you can heal anything with prayer.
That's wonderful. Is there anything else you'd like to add to this interview, Shazia?
I would just want to mimic you, Polly, saying, pray big, don't settle. What's your 3rd one?
Stand firm.
Yeah, that's the big one. Yep.
I think never settle as well, because people always are just like, well, I'll just take one jab because I have to fly. Well, I'll just do this one thing. And that one thing can ruin your life.
Oh, I know, Polly. Also, I've written hold harmless agreements. Like I wrote hold harmless agreements with the school district so that my kids could go to school unvaccinated. And the district didn't know what to do with me, really. And so I was really glad that I did that, and I think hold harmless agreements are more powerful and effective than the legal profession wants to tell you.
What about any nice home tips of food? Talk to us about food, because food is medicine, is it not? What?
Yeah, in fact, the doctor that raised us wrote a book called Food is Your Best Medicine, and we were raised that way, honestly. A little garden, pay attention to the labeling. There's so many bioengineered foods anymore. It's pretty gross.
Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.